Hello everyone, and welcome back to our third and final masterclass in this series. My name is Gemma and I'm from IDP IELTS in Australia. Once again, we're live across all of our Facebook channels, so welcome to you wherever you are in the world. Our IELTS Masterclass expert, Don Oliver, joins us again from the comfort of his own couch to host tonight's webinar, which is all about IELTS reading, speaking and listening. Don, you're looking very comfy over there this evening. I hope you're ready for some more questions in our hot seat. If you're joining us via Zoom, please leave your comments and questions in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us via Facebook, please leave any questions you have for Don in the comments and we'll try and answer as many as we can this afternoon. Don, if you're ready, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Gemma. Well, as Gemma said, we're going to be talking about the reading, speaking and listening today. And this masterclass is brought to you as always by IDP. If you have tuned in the last couple of weeks, you'll remember that we've looked very closely at the writing and also at a general overview of how to prepare for the test. And today we want to look much more closely at reading and especially speaking. So these are sometimes difficult parts of the test, and we aim today to try and help you improve your performance on those parts of the test. But as always, the first message that I want to give you is that if you want to get a good score in IELTS, you need to get better at English. And that's because IELTS is a test of your real level of English. So improve your English every day, and you can do that in many different ways. Doing a practice test is a good idea. It will tell you how the test is structured. It can warn you of the sorts of questions and the sorts of topics that you might approach in an IELTS test, but you need to do more than just practice tests. Today, I'm going to tell you how the speaking examiner assesses your speaking, and I'll show you some of the question types in the speaking and in the reading and in the listening as well. Those skills that the examiner in speaking is looking for are quite specific, and we'll look at them very closely. Sometimes, of course, a test taker will make some mistakes, and those mistakes are quite avoidable if you know what they are. So I'll remind you of some of those today. As always, I like to begin by asking you, what is your purpose for doing IELTS? And IELTS is unique because it has a general training and an academic test. You may need an academic test for further study. You may be able to do simply a general training test, which is often used for employment purposes or for immigration purposes. If you have a choice, think about your skills. If you have studied in English, if you are quite comfortable with reading complex English text, then an academic reading test will be quite suitable for you. But otherwise, the general training might be the best option for you. Okay, let's begin then with the reading. Now, the reading test is different for the academic and for the general training. Both the academic and the general training reading tests last for 60 minutes, and both of them have 40 questions. Now, 40 questions in 60 minutes is a big task. It means that you have less than a couple of minutes to answer each question. And there are a lot of words. In an academic reading test, you will have to read something like 2,500 words. But I'm going to show you how you might be able to speed up your reading and get away with not reading as many words as you might do otherwise. There are 3 sections in the academic reading test, and each of these sections is about 900 words. Now, if you look at a serious English language news magazine or popular science magazine, something like that, you'll see that each of these articles is about 900 words. It's about a page of one of these types of magazines or articles in a newspaper. I would suggest that you start reading those if you can. If you're at that level where you can get some meaning from a serious English language newspaper or magazine, do that, because it's very good practice for an academic reading test. The general training reading also has 40 questions, but the types of reading are different. They will be shorter and they will be less academic focused. The sorts of reading that you might be asked to do in a general training test could be something like what you find in your letterbox, for example, an advertisement. Or it might be something that you find in your workplace, a list of instructions. So those sorts of things, when you find them in your everyday life, a list of instructions in English, advertisements in English, read them, because this is good practice for the general training reading test. So as I said, you're asked to read a lot of words and you're given not much time, 1 hour. So the way that we test your ability in reading is to ask you to read as quickly as you can. It's difficult to read quickly in a foreign language, of course it is, but it's something you need to practice in English. It's something that you do in your own language quite comfortably. And the example that I like to give is when you're looking at a newspaper in your own language, you will look over the front page and think, is there anything interesting there? That is skimming. You are not reading for detail. You're not reading every word, but your eye is gliding across the page and trying to figure out what it's generally about and whether it's of any interest to you. The next skill you need is scanning. And scanning is something that you do in your own language. For example, if you're looking for the weather forecast for today, or if you're looking for a football score, you're looking for a particular word, the name of your city. You're looking for the name of your football team. You're looking for numbers to give you the score. This is scanning. And we'll practice a little bit of that in a moment. And finally, you do need to read for detail. And reading for detail is something that you don't always need to do, but occasionally will need to do in an IELTS reading test. And reading for detail means, is the text saying most or all? Is the text saying sometimes or never? Is it saying on or in? These are the details that are important to understand very precise and specific parts of the text. One of the things about IELTS is that it has a lot of different question types, and not all English language tests have the variety of question types that IELTS has. Now you will say, well, that's cruel. Why do you have so many question types? But one of the reasons why IELTS is the most respected English language test in the world is that it's a thorough examination of your real level of English. And one way to thoroughly examine your reading ability is to ask you different types of questions. The types of questions that we ask are very familiar to some of you. A multiple choice question, for example, is the answer A, B, or C. An identifying question, which is maybe less familiar and a little bit more demanding, is the statement true? Is the statement not true, false? Or can we not make a judgment about the truth or otherwise? Is there no information about this statement? This one is a particularly difficult one, and we'll look at an example of that in a moment. We also ask you to match ideas with the author or to match a heading to a paragraph. We ask you to match a sentence ending with a sentence beginning. We ask you to complete sentences. We ask you to complete a summary or to label a diagram. And sometimes we ask you a short answer question. When did this happen? Who said that? Now, you can see on this screen that there are different types of questions, and against some of these questions, you will see a little star, an asterisk, against multiple choice and identify a small asterisk. Now, this indicates that this type of question, the order of the answers is the same as the order of the questions. Now, this is a very important thing to remember. If you have a multiple choice set of questions, it might be about 5 questions in a row. If you answer question 1, you know that the answer to question 2 will appear in the text after the answer to question 1. And the answer to question 3 will appear in the text after the answer to question 2. Do you see how this helps you work your way through a text more quickly? And remember, speed is what you need to develop when reading in English for the IELTS test. And it's something that you really do need to develop for any purpose in another language. Okay, let's look at a true, false, and not given type of question. And this passage is about Australian Aboriginal people, the first Australians, the native Australians who were here before Europeans came to Australia. Now, by the way, the IELTS test is an international English language test. It's not just an Australian test. It's not just an English test. It's not just a test from the United States or from other countries such as that. But some of the passages that you'll be asked to read will relate to one of those countries, or they may even relate to other countries that, where the language is different to English. So don't worry about that. The principle is the same. And the first principle that I really want to remind you about is look at the questions first. Look at the text very quickly, skim, what's it all about? Look at the headings. Yes, that will give you some information. But look at the questions, because that will really direct you to where you need to find the answer. Remember, this is scanning. So if we look at the first statement, it says Aboriginal Australians are descended from the inhabitants of Africa. Your challenge is to work out what the key words are here. The key words, those words that will direct you to the answer. And of course, I think one of the key words is Africa. If you find this word Africa in the text, then this will tell you that you are close to finding the answer to the question. Another key word is descended. Now, it may not be the word descended, but it may be a word like descended, came from, originated. It may be a word like ancestor. Now, if you look at the first paragraph of this passage, you will see that the word Africa is there and the word ancestor is there. So, is this first statement true, false, or not given? Of course, it's true. This is an example of scanning. And if you practice this, you will be able to get your answers more quickly. Remember, it's finding a keyword and then finding that keyword or a similar word in the passage. So what are the keywords for the second statement? The ancestors of the Aborigines settled in Australia about 80,000 years ago. Well, I would say 80,000 is a key word. And the word settled in, or a word like came, arrived in, or started living in. Well, we can see that these words appear, or similar words appear, in the second paragraph. They arrived in a single migration at least 50,000 years ago, not 80,000. So this is false. And finally, the last question is a very good example of a question where you need to read in detail, because this is quite a difficult question. Now, I want to remind you about something very important about IELTS. IELTS tests every level of English. That means someone whose English is perfect is tested, as well as someone whose English is quite basic. That means that some of these questions are really quite difficult, and those questions are for the people who want to get a band 9 in their reading. So if you find a very difficult question, don't worry about that. That's a question for someone who is an expert at English. So don't worry about that. Some of the questions are fairly easy. Some of the questions are fairly difficult. This third question is a difficult one. Aboriginal Australians are the most genetically diverse race in the world. Well, we see in the third paragraph, we talk about genetic diversity. But we don't see the word the most. We don't see that the word greatest. We see greater genetic diversity. More, not most. So this tells us that maybe they are the most genetically diverse race in the world, but really in this paragraph we're simply comparing Australian Aboriginals to other races, some other races, not all other races. So really there's no information about this statement. So here you have an example of a true, false and not given type of question. My advice to you when doing the reading test is to look for synonyms. What are synonyms? They are words that mean the same, or words that are very similar. Settled in Australia, for example, means arrived in a single migration to Australia. Sometimes an examiner will try and distract you. They will make you think perhaps that the answer is here, where in fact it's over there. An example of this is genetic diversity is not the same as culturally diverse. Diverse is in both of those phrases, but they mean different things. So look out for synonyms and distractors, and also do these things. Make sure that you read the questions first, skim the text, look for general meaning, look for headings, look at illustrations or diagrams that might help you understand. If you're doing the pencil and paper IELTS test, use your pencil, underline keywords. If you're doing the computer delivered test, you can use the highlighting tool on the computer. Sometimes you are asked to answer in no more than one word or no more than 2 words. If you answer in 3 or 4 words, that will be marked wrong. So be careful. Look at the instructions carefully and give no more words than you are asked to give. Sometimes there will be difficult words. We just saw some of those difficult words. Genetic diversity, for example. Don't worry. Usually a difficult word is explained in the text. And if it's not explained, it's not that important. Sometimes there is a technical word which will be explained at the bottom of the passage in what we call a glossary, a short definition of a technical word. Look for that. As I said before, some of these questions are very difficult, and that's because IELTS tests all people. Don't waste time on one question. Come back to it. Leave it to the end. And remember, there is only 1 mark for each of those questions. A difficult question is worth 1 mark. An easy question is worth 1 mark. So make a guess. If you only have 2 minutes left, true, 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 true. Okay? Make sure that you don't leave any questions unanswered. Okay, we're going to look at the speaking now. Now, the speaking is, I find, one of the most interesting parts of the test, because whether you do a computer test, whether you do a pencil and paper test, whether you do an academic or a general training test, it's the same. Everyone gets the chance to talk to a friendly, qualified examiner in a quiet room where they can express themselves in English and to a sympathetic listener. The examiner, believe me, wants you to succeed. Now, the examiner conducts the test the same no matter where you are in the world. You may be in India, you may be in Japan, you may be in the Middle East, you may be in the United States. The test is exactly the same in all of those places. And it has always 3 parts to it. And you can practice for these 3 parts. The first part is an interview asking questions about yourself. What you like, what you don't like, where you live, what you do, what your hobbies are, what sort of things interest you, about your friends, for example. We're going to listen to a Japanese girl who is answering questions on 3 topics. The first one is study. The second topic is her friends. And the third topic is cooking. So you can see that they are quite simple topics, but there is a difficult question involved in all of those. And the question is, why? This girl that we're going to listen to, this girl from Japan, she's asked about cooking, but she's asked why she likes a particular type of food. She's asked about study, and she's asked why does she want to go to that university. So be prepared to answer the question, why? This is good preparation for part 1 of the speaking test. Part 2 of the speaking test is difficult because you have to speak for 2 minutes without interruption on a topic that is always a simple topic, about someone you know, about a place you know, about an object that you know, about an event that you know of. You can practice this as well. You're given 1 minute to make notes, so practice making notes. Think about what you can talk about. Your car, your motorbike. Talk about your laptop. Talk about your friend. Do it every day and make notes for 1 minute about it. Notes about my motorcycle. Yes, where I bought it, why I bought it, how much it cost, what I use it for, how much it costs to buy gasoline for it, right? Making good notes will help you in the second part of the speaking test. And finally, you are asked to have a discussion with the examiner. And this discussion is based on what you talked about in part 2. So in the case of talking about your laptop, for example, then the examiner will ask you questions about the possessions that people have, what they do with the things that they own. This is an important part of the test because it's the last thing that the examiner hears before they write down your score. So try and improve your ability to speak on sophisticated topics, to talk about general topics, to speak in an abstract way. Now, if you practice this, it's not just practicing speaking. It's also very good practice for task 2 in your writing, because in the writing, task 2, you're asked to give an opinion about a serious topic. And in the third part of the speaking, you are asked to give your opinion about serious topics. The whole test, the whole speaking test, lasts about 14 minutes. Now, the examiner is talking to you, but also assessing you. And they are not saying, oh, you are a 6, They are saying you are a 6 for one criterion, maybe a 7 for the next criterion, maybe a 6 for the third criterion, and maybe a 5 for the last criterion. Do you see that there are 4 distinct criteria that the examiner is making an assessment about? Now, these assessment criteria you can find on the IELTS Essentials website. So I suggest you go and have a look at them, the speaking assessment criteria. I'll explain what they mean in a bit more detail now. The first assessment criterion is called fluency and coherence. And fluency means you can continue to talk without stopping, without hesitating, without correcting yourself too much. You're able to speak at a reasonably good speed, not too quickly, but not too slowly. Remember, I said we're going to listen to a Japanese girl, and she does not speak very fluently. She repeats herself, she hesitates quite a lot, and she receives a fairly low score for fluency. The second criterion is lexical resource, and this just means the vocabulary that you use. Can you use natural English words and combinations of words? Are you able to use words that go together? And the way that we learn natural English is by looking at things like newspapers, but also going to YouTube, by listening to podcasts, by talking with native speakers whenever we get the opportunity, and making a note of new words and how to use them. This is an important part, not just for speaking, but for your writing and also your reading and listening. And the third criterion is grammar, your grammatical range and accuracy. Can you use accurate grammar? But also, can you use a range of grammar? Now, the girl that we're going to listen to in a moment can use some basic words and she makes herself understood, but she does not have a very wide range of grammar. She gets a 5 for this grammatical range and accuracy. And if you go to the assessment criteria, you will see that that's what a band 5 says, a limited range of grammatical structures. So practice some complex sentences. Practice sentences like if and then. Practice sentences that contain who or that or because. These are complex sentences. And finally, you are given a score for your pronunciation. Now, pronunciation has 2 parts, as you know. First, there is the sounds of the language. But the second part is also important, and that is the rhythm, the intonation of the language. And this one is maybe the hardest part. I like to think of it as the music of the language. All languages are spoken in a particular way by native speakers. Some words are pushed together, some words are separated, some words are stressed, some words are not stressed. In English, it's exactly the same. Meaning is conveyed, is given by the way that we say the words. And so you must show that to the examiner as well. Okay, they are the assessment criteria. Now, we're going to go to listen not to a two-way discussion because we thought maybe part 1 would be more interesting for you. So, wish me luck. I'm going to now go to a YouTube video, stopping sharing a new screen, going to this and sharing there. We have a lovely girl called Ayako, and this was recorded about 4 years ago. And at this stage, Ayako was about around a band 5 for speaking. Now she would be a 7 or 7.5 or maybe even an 8. But this is what she was like 4 years ago. Now, as I said, this is part 1 of the speaking test. And in part 1, the examiner will ask about simple things related to the test taker's personal life and preferences. As we listen to Ayako answer these questions, you will see some comments come up. And those comments will indicate how well she is doing in terms of fluency, the first criterion, the lexical resource, the second criterion, the grammatical range and accuracy, the third criterion, and finally, her pronunciation. So let's listen together to Ayako.
I'm from Japan.
Okay. In this first part, I'd like to ask you some questions about yourself. Let's talk about what you do. Do you work or are you a student?
I'm a student in Japanese university, and I'm studying social science, and this major is like economics and media and international program.
Okay. Where are you studying in Japan?
University name, Toyo Ewa University.
Okay. Why did you choose that university?
This university is women university, just women, and I used to went to girls' high school for 6 years, so I wanted to go to women university.
Okay. Let's go on to talk about friends now. Are your friends mostly your age or different ages?
Most of my same age.
Do you usually see your friends during the week or at weekends?
Yes, both. I can see that at school, and after school I go to somewhere with my friend, and on weekend I go to lunch or dinner with my friend.
The last time you saw your friends, what did you do together?
I've been studying here, so I can't see my friend for a long time. But last time I met my friend, they gave me some gift, like album and message, because we can't see for a long time.
In what ways are your friends important to you?
What?
In what ways are your friends important to you?
The most important things is talking about same thing, because I don't have any hobby, so I'm boring person. So but I like to talk with my friend. So I just talk.
I'd like to move on to talk about food and cooking. What kinds of food do you like to eat?
I like sushi.
Why?
Because sushi is raw fish and rice with vinegar. I like rice with vinegar, so I can eat just rice.
What kind of new food would you like to try?
New food. I never tried Vegemite.
All right.
But it smells a little bit not my favorite. But I want to try it before I'm leaving
Do you like cooking?
Yeah.
Why?
Cooking is use my brain and doing same thing at same time. So maybe it's good for my brain.
What was the last meal that you cooked?
I cooked Japanese curry.
All right.
Okay. So you'll see that Ayako was able to make herself understood, but she had a few problems with her fluency, particularly. Sometimes she couldn't find the right word, and her grammar was pretty restricted in terms of the variety of grammar. And finally, there were some pronunciation features which caused a little bit of confusion. Low fish and lice, for example. But that was good enough to get a band 5 or maybe a little bit less. My advice to you is, and by the way, you can see that video on YouTube, and we might post the link on Facebook. Gemma, maybe we can do that later. My advice to you, before the speaking test, make sure you practice speaking every day. Talk to your friends in English, talk to your family in English if you can, okay? Make sure that you are in the English mood, that the words come to you quite quickly. That will help you when you do your speaking test. Sometimes we get nervous and we speak very quickly. Sometimes we get nervous and we speak very slowly. Be conscious of that and try and keep a steady rate of speaking. With Ayako, for example, she could have said some things like, well, that's an interesting question. Let me think for a moment about that. These little phrases can increase our fluency. As I said before, practice making notes for part 2 of the test. And as I just said, fill up the empty spaces with natural sounding phrases. Let me think. That's a difficult question. Oh, well, of course. Try and put some color into your voice. Intonation is important, remember? And if you make a grammatical error, you can fix it up, but you don't have to fix every error up. Keep fluent as well as accurate. As well as that, practice doing these things. When you speak in English, when you are asked a question, practice extending your answer. That is, give a few details. Explain why you think such a thing. Compare different sides of an argument. Make that a habit. And if you make that a habit, it will transfer to your speaking test and also your writing test. You can practice particular topics which are common in IELTS. In part 1, travel, hobbies, your city, etc. But try and make it natural when you talk about those things. When you give your opinion, there are ways to do it. Well, as far as I'm concerned, generally speaking, I would say, as a matter of fact, practice these connecting words because that will improve your score on the first criterion, fluency and coherence. Okay, we're not going to listen to any of the listening tests today because we don't have time. But I can tell you that there are 4 parts to the listening test, and you should practice listening to different types of English. The first part of the listening test is a conversation, an everyday conversation. between two people. They might be discussing going shopping, or they might be discussing an event that's coming up. Second part is one person giving information, very often recorded information. It might be a recorded message on a telephone telling you about some event that is occurring, or it might be a radio broadcast. The third part of the test will be a conversation between 3 or 4 different people who are talking about an academic topic. It might be about an essay or a seminar paper or something like that, or a project, a school project. And finally, you will hear one person giving a lecture, similar to what I'm doing here. One person talking about a serious topic and giving information. You can listen to lectures online all the time. There are many examples there, so practice doing that. If you're doing the pencil and paper test, you have 10 minutes to transfer your answers. But if you're doing the computer test, you don't have extra time because you put your answers onto the computer screen as you go. Remember, you only listen to the recording once. So you must keep concentrating from the first to the very last. And remember, the answers come in the same order as the recording. So when you hear the answer to question number 31, you know the answer to question 32 is coming up next. This is important because it helps you navigate to find your way through the listening. And finally, when you are asked to write your answers, sometimes you need to write a word. If you don't spell that word correctly, then that will be marked as wrong. If you're doing the pencil and paper test, if you don't write it clearly, then that will be marked as wrong as well. So be careful about those two things when you do the listening test. Okay, we're nearly finished and we'll take some questions in a moment, Gemma. I'm running a bit late, but I'll hurry up. Make sure that you look at the questions. You're given time to do that. Look at the questions before the recording. Think about key words like we did with the reading, remember? Underline those key words with your pencil. Think of other words that you may hear that mean the same as the word in the question. In other words, synonyms. As I said, the questions follow the order of the recording, so that will help you. Remember, if they say answer in only 1 word or 2 words, don't give 3 or 4 words. Intonation will sometimes help because in the listening, they might say, oh, it was in 1999. Oh, wait, in 1998. 98 is the answer because intonation tells you it was. Okay, to sum up, take every opportunity to practice your English. Set targets for your preparation. I'm going to read a page of this book tonight in bed. I'm going to learn 5 new words. I'm going to use 5 new words. Decide, is it academic or general training? Look at the assessment criteria to see how you'll be scored. And do IELTS preparation, but do more. Remember, every day counts towards language skills. It may take you 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 years to get the score that you really want. But if you keep practicing, it will happen. Okay, your next steps, go to our website. IELTS Essentials has a lot of information. And please go to the Facebook website and you will find answers to many questions, and you can also put your questions there, which will be answered. Okay, one last thing. IELTS Assist in some countries will help you. It's where we give you full feedback on your writing or your reading and your speaking. And you can also take official IELTS practice tests the IELTS progress check is a very useful way of working out what level you are at. Okay, Gemma, I'm ready now to answer any questions.
Thank you, Don. Another fantastic presentation with a lot of great tips and explanations. And you had a bit of a tricky one this week with the screen share, but
and nailed it.
You nailed it. It was a flawless share, so well done. We've had a few questions regarding that video with Akayo, and we will be sharing that tomorrow on our Facebook accounts. So keep an eye out. Come back and check Facebook for that full-length video with Don's younger brother.
Yeah.
And alrighty, so we'll get into the questions now. We've got quite a few, particularly around speaking. All right, first question is, what does it mean when my speaking examiner interrupts me in the speaking test?
It's a good sign. If the examiner, the examiner must keep to the time. All tests cannot go beyond 14 minutes. And that means the examiner will sometimes have to stop you to get on to the next topic. Now, if they do that, that means that you are giving a lot of language. You are fluent. And it means that you should expect to get a fairly good score for your fluency. So when the examiner stops you, that's a good sign. So don't worry about that.
Great, thank you. Alrighty, this question also about speaking. I'm wondering about how to give a false story in speaking test. For example, if I get a topic about losing my wallet, but I've never had that kind of experience, what is your advice about how to answer that question?
Well, you can make up a story, but I always find that telling the truth is easiest. There's no, you're not expected to have had an experience. For example, if they say, well, tell me about a time when you lost something, they wouldn't say lost your wallet. They would say lost something. Now, if you've never lost anything, talk about that. Say, well, I am a very unique person. I have never, ever lost anything except my teeth when I was 6 years of age, right? And you can talk about that. There's no problem. You can talk around the topic, and as long as you use good English.
That's a great tip. Thank you. Okay, and a similar question actually. Am I allowed to ask my speaking examiner for an alternative speaking topic?
No, you're not. In part 2, the examiner will say, and here is your topic. I would like you to describe blah, blah, blah. If, for example, the topic is, I would like you to describe a movie that you liked, right? And you've never seen a movie. It's okay. Relax. Say, you can begin by answering like this. Well, I've never seen a movie. And the reason I've never seen a movie is I think they're too expensive, or they're silly, or I much prefer to read a book. And I read many books. My friends like to watch movies. You can talk for 10 minutes about why you don't watch movies and the other things that you prefer to do. And that's perfectly okay.
Someone has asked a question about the 2-minute time frame in part 2. Will it affect their scores if I'm unable to speak for 2 minutes?
No, the examiner will ask you if, say, for example, you only speak for 1 minute, the examiner at the end of that 1 minute will say, can you tell me anything more about this part that's on the task? And you should be able to say a little bit more. But again, I'd go back to what I suggested earlier on. You can practice making good notes in preparation for part 2. And good notes will be not sentences, they will be maybe 10 key words. And remember, if you can just talk for 15 seconds on each of those words, well, you'll speak well beyond 2 minutes.
Great. And someone has asked a question, how do I improve my fluency and different accents? Do our test takers need to speak in accents?
Well, there are two questions there, fluency and accent. Well, improving fluency there are many things. Practicing English a lot. The more words you know, the more fluent you will be. You won't be searching for a word, right? That will make you fluent. You can learn some connecting words that will help you connect your ideas. That will help you be fluent. Generally speaking, as a matter of fact, apart from that, in contrast, such words as that will help you be maintain fluency. And that second question about accent, I have an accent, you have an accent, we both have you have a Tasmanian accent, I have an Australian accent, and that's okay. Everyone has an accent. The only problem is if the accent prevents people understanding you. So don't worry about accent, just worry about making the sounds of English so that you can be understood.
And that's one of the benefits of the face-to-face speaking test with IELTS, that we can hear your accent. And
that's true. And every examiner has lived probably overseas, probably knows another language as well, and they have many years of experience teaching people English. So they are very comfortable with accent.
And one final speaking test question here before we move on to reading. If I use more idioms in my speaking test, will it improve my speaking score?
Well, if you use idioms correctly, yes, but idioms are difficult in any language, and I would want you to be 100% sure that you are using the idiom correctly. Now, there are idioms and there are idioms. Some idioms are very odd sounding. For example, in Australia, if you're very busy, you might say, I am flat out like a lizard drinking. Now that is a very odd idiom. Don't worry about that one. But if I talk about idiomatic language, sometimes it's simply a phrasal verb, a combination of words which is natural. For example, if I use the word fabulous, which is an adjective, I can use an adverb like absolutely fabulous. But I can't say very fabulous. No one ever says that in English, right? That's an example of the very fabulous is not idiomatic. Absolutely fabulous is idiomatic. So think about those sorts of things and they will improve your score in the second criterion, lexical resource.
Thank you. Okay, let's take a look at some questions about the reading test. Someone has said here, once I got a band 9 in the reading test, but the second time I felt it was harder compared with other reading tests that I'd done before. Are IELTS tests different in their level of difficulty?
It's a very good question. Sometimes you might find the topics are very suitable for you. You may know a lot about a particular topic, which will make it a bit easier. We can't avoid that. Sometimes the test may be a little bit more difficult, but Cambridge, who produced the tests, test each question beforehand, and they know a percentage of people who answer that question correctly. So there might be a question that they put into a test that only 20% of people answer correctly. That tells them that the reading test is quite difficult. So they will make sure that the score you need to get a 7 or an 8 or a 9 is less than the score you need for an easier test. In other words, the band score is adjusted based on their understanding of the difficulty of the test. So don't worry too much about that.
Thank you. Okay, so a few people have asked for some practical tips about reading the passages a little bit quicker. So someone here has written, Dear Don, my question is about reading techniques to save time, like reading from bottom to top or reading in a zigzag form, which is not easy for me to do. Do you have any other suggestions?
I've never read from bottom to top, nor have I read in a zigzag fashion. that's new to me. I would simply say practice different ways of reading quickly and do what works. For some people, well, for most people, I think reading in the normal sort of horizontal fashion downwards would be the most natural one, but practice focusing on content words, and that is verbs and nouns. You don't have to worry too much about prepositions and articles and adjectives, for example, if you are scanning, if you are skimming. So it's a skill which you have already in your own language, but it's a skill that can be transferred to your to English as well.
Okay, moving on to a listening question. Someone has asked, can I listen to the listening section twice?
No, you cannot. The listening comes and then it goes, and it's never going to return. It's like being 25. He said, sadly.
Okay, sorry, we've got a lot of questions coming in from Facebook and Zoom. See if I can find another one. So someone's asked, any tips or tricks to crack and score full marks in the last session of the listening test?
In the last section, full marks in the last section. Well,
yes.
The last section, as I said, is a lecture. And lectures generally follow a fairly predictable pattern. The lecturer will introduce a topic, they will expand on the topic, and they will probably draw some conclusions about the topic. Now, knowing the structure of something is actually very useful. And the same applies to the reading. Most articles have a fairly predictable structure, and they are similar to what I just described. The more lectures you listen to, then the more you will understand that structure. But really, the more words you know, the better you'll be able to comprehend things. And really, that's the only advice I should give. Practice listening to lectures and improve your vocabulary.
Thank you. Well, we've only got a minute to go, so we'll finish this evening with another shout out. We did a shout out last week. This time, Leandro has written, my test is tomorrow. I'm anxious about it. Can you wish me luck, Don?
I wish you the very best of luck, and I've got my fingers crossed and I've got my toes crossed as well for you.
Thank you. We also had quite a few questions come in tonight about writing. Don did an IELTS masterclass in writing last week, and that is recorded and saved on our Facebook IELTS Essentials account. If you just pop to the videos tab, you can view that presentation from last week. But Don, that wraps us up for this evening. So thank you for joining us for these 3 masterclasses.
My pleasure. Really thank you.
Appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone who joined tonight and asked a question. And sorry if we didn't get around to your question. We will try and respond to as many as possible via Facebook. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Bye.